We've been talking about vast hangar-like buildings full of tapes and management processes and all this kind of thing, the security of digital content. Taking that one step further, assuming we've filled every square metre of available land and we now have to look to the skies, the cloud. What advantages and risks are there in conducting media management in the cloud, particularly in terms of the security of content? And we've talked about how easy it is for things to be now stolen and those infringements, as well as the examples we've had from the finance and intelligence industries.
I think that, let's be honest, the cloud is nothing new. It's in the 60s it was called a bureau. In the 70s it was called minis, mini computers. In the 80s it was called the ASP model. And we're now in the 2000s and it's called the cloud. So it's nothing new. It's just that I think, the internet, the bandwidth available, digital content and the explosion in technology has enabled it to be much more efficient and much more significant player these days. I think it's a very good thing. I think the cloud enables the access, as we've been talking about, with the government's making the archives more available online. So I think working in the cloud is a significant area. We've spoken about workflow with regards to joining up different organisations, and it enables that environment. So I actually think that the cloud is, again, I think it's terminology, marketing hype, whatever you want to call it, but at the end of the day, it's enabling the industry to work together and to produce and provide that content wherever.
Jeff, I'm very interested in the point that's been made by Peter about looking at other industries and how they've been able to secure their content. Do you think there are lessons to be learned, and we're talking specifically about the cloud here in terms of for media asset management and broadcast?
Yes, I think there are. Tony mentioned Toy Story already, and there has to be methods within other industries. Financial services has been mentioned, that have got very good portable, relatively cheap, probably very cheap when you look at the costs involved in the loss of something like Toy Story. And yes, the security model in the cloud is important. It's very important because the content is the thing that will make or break the fortunes of the company that were the original production company. So yes, it's important. There are other models around. We're seeing much more of a merge between broadcast and the classic IT industry, IS industries recently. Well, not recently, over the last 10, 15 years. And I think we should be learning and looking because there are much bigger financial risks, and that's what we're talking about at the end of the day, money. And the city has got much bigger financial risks associated with it than probably anything that the media industry does, and they very rarely have security problems. So I think we should be learning from what they've done, not reinventing the wheel, but learning from the mistakes that they've made in the past.
Peter, Toy Story 3 is a very good case in point. Do you think the broadcast industry's lagged behind the other ones and has just sort of refused to learn the lessons that have been learned the hard way in other industries?
I think one of the challenges with the broadcast industry in general is that there are a few industries, I think, that have seen such a huge pace of change, not just in terms of technology available, but also in terms of changing viewing habits, different ways of looking at content, and so on. And I think that part of the race that all broadcasters and content producers are in the whole time is to get their content to more places, which is a little bit, in some respects, at odds to securing it. And I think that's why we have challenges sometimes, because the business focus is usually around how do we get this to as many places as we can, how do we distribute this, how do we get this, how do we get the biggest audience here, there, and things like security and a lot of the business processes take a little bit of a backseat to that, which is why sometimes they're not always necessarily as up to the minute as other industries. I think as well, because in our industry, when some material is lost, quite often, there are consequences but it's really life or death for a business that happens. And I think that because of that, there's not as much regulation. The financial industry is a good example where there's significant regulation and rules they have to adhere to. So I think our industry is just not necessarily completely up to date with everything they could be doing, but I think that we are learning. And the great thing about being in the situation we are in is that we can look at these other industries, see how they're doing things, and shortcut our ability to get there, which is no bad thing.
In terms of the cloud, because it does pose its own particular challenges, and as regards the kind of content that's floating around, and I think Toy Story 3 and anything of that nature provides a good example, because actually vast amounts of money are involved in that. I mean, Tony, what special kind of security challenges do you think are posed in this area?
Well, I think it does go down to, we've been talking about making the systems more accessible, working with other partners, joining up the content life cycle, if you like. And I think the challenges that we have in this industry is the fact that the content is produced by a production company, it goes through post-production companies, it goes to subtitling, audio description houses, voiceover houses, graphics, etc. So I think the amount of different steps in the process are what cause the issues of security. Ironically, the cloud actually helps that process significantly. So I think the issue that we've got to do within the industry is trying to work out how we secure that content. Because as much as, and I agree, Peter, that the fact that the broadcasters and media owners are trying to make this content available to a much wider audience, they do want to monetize it. They have to get the money back on it. It's a significant cost outlay for a production company to make something like Toy Story. So they have to get their money back somehow. So I think it's a bit of a challenge insofar as the cloud enables the business, but also there is the huge challenge of how do you secure that content. Digital rights management, digital content management, whether it be watermarking. Problem with watermarking content is you can only tell where it's come from. You can't really tell anything else about it, who's ripped it off, if you like. So there are the challenges in there to be able to secure that content through all of the production process and out to consumption.
Jeff, you talked earlier about workflow, which is the subject at hand here, media management not being a technology, but in terms of the cloud, actually we do have to bring technological answers to these security questions, do we not?
I would disagree. I think that before you get the technology in, you've got to sort the processes. Do processes drive technology, or does technology drive processes? It's that old question. And I'm a firm believer in believing that it should be the process. Don't let the technology drive you down a particular road, because you'll end up in a cul-de-sac 9 times out of 10. You've got to work out what you want to do, how you want to do it, on a blank piece of paper almost, and then fit the technologies around. Technology is so flexible these days that it will do anything and everything that you want it to do.
Peter, you spoke earlier about security and indeed media asset management being a way of thinking, so I presume you would agree with Jeff on this point about process first.
Yeah, I mean, fundamentally, absolutely. I think there's always a little bit of a compromise, though, and I think that I think it's absolutely vital to design the process that you need for your business first, and then try and make the technology fit as a second step. But I think you should be a little bit prepared to compromise if the technology is much more straightforward and cost effective to make a small change to the process and so on. But I think it's just a question of applying good judgment. I don't think there's anything more to it than that in some respects.
You're probably right at that stage, although I was very black and white. In the real world, yes, you have to make certain compromises, and if it's a case of, well, we could perhaps change the process a little bit.
Exactly.
To be able to do it at a cheaper price.
How many times have we all heard, well, we've always done it that way?
Exactly.
That's the typical reason for not implementing new processes. change management, whether it be in the cloud or whether it be within an organisation, is the most significant issue within media management. It's not about the technology. Back in the 80s and the early 90s, the broadcast and media industry was a technology-led industry. It was all about the technology, whether it be tape decks, whether it be however it was. But now I think it's a technology-enabled industry. And to Peter's point, I think absolutely you've got to be able to compromise and turn around and look at what you can do with that technology, and then maybe change your processes to work with it. It is too much of, I think we do hear too many times, we've always done it that way.
We certainly find with some of our customers that we give them some technology to help them implement a workflow, and then they find there are other things they can achieve with that same technology for no extra cost. And they can all of a sudden start to repurpose their material for a different platform or a different end market. And it's something they never even thought of doing before because they assumed it would cost them too much to do. But sometimes it's just that they get that as part of fixing a different problem. And it's just a question of always taking a look at what you've got and saying, well, what else can I do with this as well?